where is the China success coming from?
Is it because of the government or despite the government?
Actually, sometimes when you look at the numbers, I often try to double check them and I say, oh my God, they are very scared, to come with patents to China, or, it's like China copycat, which is also not true anymore. For many years, IP protection was on top of the complaint list, and it has really come down a lot. The European chambers patting that, say, we've done a good job. But actually, the main drive also comes from the local companies.
Hi guys, welcome to this next episode of Ashley's Digital China. Today I'm bringing you Peter Helis, who is an old China hand, has been in the region for a while and has developed not only the China itself, international trade, and is also developing right now the Guangzhou region together with a lot of enterprises and organizations. Peter, fantastic to have you on the show. How are you?
Fantastic to have you also here in Guangzhou.
Woo!
Welcome to Guangzhou, yes.
Yay! Thank you so very much. First of all, tell us your story. How and why did you come to China? How have you ended up right now, all these years and tons of professions later, working for the Guangdong government, promoting this region on the international stage and arena?
The first time I came to China was in 1999, spent 1 year in Beijing, and then I came back in 2003, lived 10 years in Hong Kong, where I was working first for an American company, then for a typical German hidden champion, always doing sales at that time, but not selling to just anyone, selling to the Chinese. So my career started with selling to Chinese people. Then in 2013, I moved up the Pearl River from Hong Kong to Guangzhou. That's where I am right now. So I've been living here for 11 years now. That's where I also started my government career. I first started with the German Chamber. I was there the general manager of the German Industry and Commerce. So that's basically the consultancy company within the German Chamber. And I did that for a few years. I continued in my own business. And then I was a vice chair for the European Chamber for 2 years. And then in 2019, I joined the Guangzhou Huangpu team. So Guangzhou Huangpu, to all the viewers who are not so familiar with Guangzhou especially, or with Huangpu in particular, basically Huangpu is to Guangzhou what Pudong is to Shanghai. So the main business district. Just from the scale, it has has a GDP of like 60 billion. It produces 1% of the China industrial output is produced in
Huangpu, just this one district.
Yes, yeah. So I've been living there living in Guangzhou, now also in Huangpu for 5 years now. Yeah.
It's a fascinating journey. You started the business with basically working for, as you said, European companies and an American. Wow! And later on, you've had your own business, the government, geopolitical, geosocial consulting, and now you're working for the government organization. Right. What are the differences in the working culture, in the way things are handled, understood, or implemented?
Well, I think from 2013 onwards, working in the German Chamber, chambers, they do lobbying. They help the German companies. Later on, trying to help the European companies when I was vice chair of the European Chamber. So actually, my job hasn't changed that much. In order to fulfill my KPIs that I have to help international business. So now it's, it started with German business, helping German business, then European business, and now it's Western business. So basically, I take care of American investors, European investors, not so much the Asian investors. Yeah, my job is still similar because, I need to lobby with the government. I need to tell them, this is something we need to do in order to attract more foreign direct investment. Seeing the style of the government, I can tell you they work very hard. Very long hours, very often 7 days a week. Actually, I think within the government, probably I'm the most lazy one because, very often they don't bother me on the weekends. But I know, they work very long hours and they have very strict KPIs. Sometimes you may wonder, where's the China success coming from? It's because...
Is it because of the government or despite the government? A lot of people ask that question. And maybe in some ways both.
Right. Of course, from my perspective and what I've seen and what has been implemented, I think a lot of the China success story comes down to the implementations that have been done and guided by the government.
And the big picture, right?
Yes.
To coordinate such a big economy. It's the big picture that counts, right?
Exactly. So, the initiatives that you see here and keep on seeing and the plans that are being laid out, just Vietnam, now. We had the third plenum at the end of July, just being completed. Again, there are roadmaps being laid out, trickles down from central government to provincial government, city government, and then we get it on the district level.
It's very interesting because a couple of years back, when you spoke about having an unbothered living, being chill, everybody was just like, you know what? I'm going to become a government official. I'm going to get a low salary, but I'm going to have good benefits.
Right.
And then I'm going to be untouchable, then I'm going to retire and basically be sorted. And what you are talking about is that it's basically a very KPI driven, a very tough and competitive environment. And of course, in China, also for our viewers, please do remember that in order to become an official, you also need to pass a very difficult test. Very often hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of people competing for that one spot.
But, saying that, I mean, when you look at the businesses, they are equally, very hardworking. You have the Liu,
Yes, 996.
996. I think it depends on where you are. I think in the business world, it can also be extremely tough. We always say that Quan basically means very extremely competitive, sometimes to the level of exhaustion.
So you see it and you feel it as well?
Well, I see it, when we talk to the companies, when we talk to all kinds of different people, and a very driven society.
And is it a problem because you are looking after, European and let's say Western investors in Guangdong? Is it a problem for them to arrive in a completely different culture and remain successful here, hire, manage the team, be part of that working culture?
When we look at the development of the Pearl River Delta, what we now call the Greater Bay Area, it's inseparable with foreign investors. Actually, the first wave of the foreign investments came into the Pearl River Delta from Hong Kong, from Taiwan, then later on the American investors. I mean, you have when we talk about Huangpu, for example, the first investment came in 1981 from Coca-Cola, through Swire, Hong Kong Swire, and then Coca-Cola was set up 1988, Procter & Gamble, and then Amway. So all these kind of businesses, they have been here and they haven't left. In the early days, maybe some of them, they were focused on producing for the export, taking advantage of the low labor cost here and exporting. But if you see some of the figures, let's say for example from the American Chamber, they had some figures comparing 2003 and 2018. I remember that very clearly because in 2003 it was roughly 80% were producing for the export and 20% were producing for the domestic market. 20 years later, it's the total opposite. 20% for export and 80% for the domestic market. But at the same time, both numbers have gone up. It's not like export has significantly decreased. China is exporting more, but also now you have the
bigger local market.
So that's why companies come here. The old days, they came for low labor cost, abundance of labor cost. And now you come here, or you come for the talent actually. In those days, I mean, these people were unskilled. They came from the countryside, the migrant laborers. And now you have a very large pool of highly educated people. I mean, the concentration of universities that you have now here, especially in Guangzhou, Shenzhen not that much because, it's a younger city, but we have 1 million students every year graduating in Guangzhou. That's quite a number. And then you have the supply chain. I mean, it's a fantastic network of supply chain, that you have within the Greater Bay Area. And then you have the market. So it has it all now because, I mean, the GDP of the Greater Bay Area last year was just about $2 trillion. So that's around Canada, or, I'm from Germany, so half of Germany. But the population is similar to that of Germany. So you can see it's like a GDP per head, half of that of Germany. Huangpu, for example, I recently had New Zealand investors, and then I did some comparison and I realized, our population of Huangpu quite small because, most people live downtown. So we have 1.5 million people living there and a GDP of 60 billion, which is similar to Cologne. But then I compared to New Zealand and then I realized our GDP is 1/4 of New Zealand and our population also 1/4 of New Zealand. So GDP per head in Guangzhou, Huangpu is that of New Zealand.
That of New Zealand.
So that's a developed world country. Sometimes people are not aware of the numbers here also.
Yeah, because China is a big country, right? And once you generalize, it all loses relevance, right? Exactly. If you just divide it by the number of people, it makes no sense.
Exactly.
When it comes to some of the companies that are already here for a long time, here in Guangzhou, manufacturing, sourcing, being really very solidly present. You've just now mentioned Coca-Cola Swire. You've mentioned Amway. Who else is here?
Oh.
Who isn't here?
Exactly. Who isn't here? I mean, we have very successful companies like Zeiss, like Bayer. Of course, for me being in charge of the foreign investment promotion, I will mention the big international ones first. I mean, we have more than 200 Fortune 500 companies here. So companies like Hyundai, LG. I mean, our largest investor is actually LG with $14 billion investment. So that's their largest factory outside of Korea. And then they still keep on coming. For example, recently Volkswagen bought into, you might know the company Xiaopeng, XPeng, XPeng in the Western world. Volkswagen invested $700 million into XPeng, and now they're co-developing certain aspects. So I think in the future there will be this cooperation is just starting. Actually, currently we have 100 Volkswagen engineers in Guangzhou, Huangpu, working together with XPeng to develop the joint technology.
Are there some industries or businesses that have left? I'll give you an example. Guangzhou has a really big Korean and Japanese community, expat community, and I spoke with a friend and said, many Japanese and Koreans left.
Right.
And it's basically, Samsung used to be very big and right now no longer. So has anybody left or downsized significantly their operation in the past years? Is there any pattern of a specific business or industry that's not doing very well?
But actually, the China investment market is extremely dynamic. You could not have had this development that we had for the last 40 years if companies hadn't left. When you look at the Pearl River Delta, let's say until like 2008, I think 2008 is this kind of number of a watershed for the development. Because until that time, it was like really the workbench of the world with low cost production, cheap goods, low quality, high pollution, low efficiency, etc. All these kind of things that still people try to label on China. And then, 2008, well, everyone knows that's 2008, 2009 global financial crisis.
Yeah.
So the export collapsed. And then, there was a awakening. And from that time on, you could see the move slogan was from made in Guangdong to create in Guangdong.
Yeah.
And then, during that time, so 2008 until now and continuing, that's actually where all the drive for R&D, the drive for their own labels, their own brands came up. So of course, to answer your question, in the wake of that, a lot of companies have left, but also like Chinese companies, well, they have left, but they moved to maybe inland, maybe they moved to Southeast Asia. This is not necessarily something bad. This is a spillover effect. I mean, if you look at, for example, Shenzhen is very famous for Huawei. So Huawei started in Shenzhen, but then, now they're in Dongguan, right? So they left, to a large part, left Shenzhen. Is it bad for Shenzhen or is it good for Shenzhen? Is it bad for Dongguan or is it good for... Everyone will say, it's good for Dongguan, bad for Shenzhen. But actually, it pulls up other resources. So now the R&D is in Shenzhen and, more the production is in Dongguan. And that's the same, that's kind of like a microcosm. But if you enlarge that, you can see the toy factories, the sport shoe factories. They move to Vietnam, they move to, other places in Southeast Asia, and very often still run by Chinese companies.
And it gives everybody specialization as well,
exactly.
Right?
And it creates wealth in the periphery. So before it was like just the East Coast was developing in China, but now, the inward move also, it has lifted up a lot of people out of poverty there as well, so has created jobs.
Yeah, that's what you see with Sichuan, for say, right? When, for example, Chengdu in the past 15 years,
right,
moving from 5 million people to 22 million people.
Absolutely.
And creating new industries, manufacturing beyond just farming and let's look at the pandas.
Exactly.
What are a couple of companies, local companies, that you believe everybody needs to know about in, kind of Guangzhou, or if you want to talk about Guangdong, kind of bigger area? What are some of the names? Because we might all know Huawei, but what are some of the names?
That's an excellent question. Sometimes I complain a little bit, because in the Western perspective, a lot of people talk about Shenzhen now because there's the Huawei,
Neos and...
Guangzhou right now, XPeng is quite famous now because they have also entered the European market. Then we have Yihang. So Yihang is what we call an e-votal for the low-flying economy. So basically, they will literally be taking off by the end of this year. So they have...
The copters, exactly, the drones, kind of a passenger, exactly, drone.
Globally, we have more than 400 of these kind of e-votal companies. And Yihang is the first to receive the license.
Globally,
to take
not
off.
just in China, globally.
By the end of this year, you will see like this kind of e-votal pads on the high rises of the buildings, and then you will see them going from point to point. You don't fly them yourself. They are point-to-point taxis, kind of like a taxi service.
So there's no pilot in, right? It's automated.
No, it's all automated, yeah. It's a little bit of a fast thing.
The future is here!
Yes, exactly. And then you have WeRide. WeRide was first founded in Silicon Valley in San Francisco in 2017, but then they moved their global headquarters to Guangzhou. And they're on Guangzhou International Bio Island. That's an island in the Pearl River dedicated to actually only life science. But why are they there? Because, they have this closed ecosystem and, the island, so they can do their test rides.
Oh.
So now they have already developed autonomous buses, autonomous street sweepers, delivery cars. It's also quite amazing. Their taxi fleet is now slowly spreading out into the suburbs. I mean, and when you talk about Guangzhou suburbs, for AI, it's about the learning curve. You have the bikes on the road, you have the tricycles on the road, you have the grandma with the child. So you need to have the AI and the ability of this, sensors to avoid it.
So these are all very modern businesses. But when people close their eyes and they think, if they ever think about Guangzhou or Guangdong, very often it's like manufacturing. Are there still big manufacturing giants here in town, or is it primarily run by smaller businesses?
Well, we talked about Amway before. Amway has been here since 1995, and they're currently upgrading their production facilities because they cannot meet the demand anymore. And actually, Guangzhou is basically covering 45% of their global production for Amway. Out of Guangzhou, Huangpu. And then, of course, you have Shane, the global giant. There's a Guangzhou company.
Guangzhou company, guys. If you ever bought on Shane, it's from here.
Actually, Shane, when we talk about Shane is one of the 24 unicorns that we have. Unicorn is basically a company that's not listed yet and worth $1 billion US. And Shane, worth a lot more, is a local company. And we have altogether now 24 unicorns ranking globally for city-wise, number 9. So we are the 9th city. So Guangzhou is on par with Canada or Israel for the number of unicorns that we have.
As a country, Canada is a country, and we just as a city. Yes. This is fascinating.
Actually, sometimes when you look at the numbers, I often try to double check them and I was like, my God, Guangzhou's GDP is similar to the GDP of Vietnam alone. Of course, Guangzhou also has 22 million people living here. So that's a quarter of the Greater Bay Area.
So it's a huge place together with Shenzhen, driving a lot of technology, manufacturing, innovation as well. Right. And most importantly of all, I believe, implementation. Right. Because it's one thing to develop and think about it and produce prototypes. And it's very different to say, hey, okay, let's be the first one to actually implement it and let's see how our engineers, our grandmas, and our taxi drivers will adapt to this new digitally connected world and product and whatnot. Let's go back to mindset a little bit, just to change the topic and the direction. You've been working in the China-EU space for such a long time. What is your perspective on the current geopolitical tensions and whether or not they actually impact real business? Whether it's getting into people's hands, whether Europeans are a lot more cautious about China, or Chinese, on the other hand, a lot more cautious of Europeans. You've been in this industry for a while, so do you see that trend really creating real life impact?
Of course, first we talked about decoupling, then we talked about de-risking. I think at the moment it's a little bit more toned down, but the more you talk about something, of course, something will happen. Europe is made up of 95% SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, and I think they are impacted the most. Why is that? Because, the multinational companies, first of all, they're localized, their baskets spread out. They keep on expanding. They're not swayed by any of these kind of narratives, or not that much. Of course, they will
because they also travel a lot, because they have business interests, because they have teams internationally. Right. They probably have a different overview and the different risk and the interest level in the market, right?
What also comes to that is, compared to the SMEs, the multinational company is localized. They know the ins and outs of the local market. Very often they will have a local CEO or a local GM. They know how it works. Their feedback with the headquarters is also on a different level. Yeah. Whereas if you talk, SMEs, first of all, the investment will not be that much. Very often they have maybe only a few patents. They are very scared, to come with patents to China, or, it's like China copycat, which is also not true anymore because, this is actually another topic we can talk for another hour. And then also, very often they cannot look through the narrative. Let's say you have a German company and a Mr. Müller GmbH, right? And then Mr. Müller sends his Mr. Meyer to China. Even this Mr. Meyer here in China, he will not speak very well Chinese very often. He will still read Western newspapers, and he will be here like very cautious. I'm exaggerating a little bit to make my point, but this is what I find is a pity, because the multinationals, they double down. Whereas the SMEs are very cautious, often too cautious. Being cautious, of course, this is right, because now China is a different China from 20, 30 years ago, and it's innovative in their own right. So if you come to China, you better do your homework. You check very carefully whether your product can make it here, because this market is extremely competitive. And if you have a competitive product and you think, oh, I'm so great already around the world, don't be too proud. Come here and take it as your gym, as your training ground. Learn, because this area, I mean, it's so dynamic, it's so fast moving. You see all these electronic gadgets every time and they're tweaking. And very often what I can see now is even on the international markets, the competition is very often now Chinese company against Chinese company. So this is also something quite incredible.
Yeah, and the price wars, just going back to your previous example, XPeng, and we have BYDs and NIOs. I mean, all the Chinese new EV companies right now are surviving not on consumer sales. They're surviving on government subsidies, and they are taking this time to develop a good product, to push down the manufacturing cost, and to dominate a market share. So you can get a really nice car for 200,000, for 150,000 RMB, right? And they are in this constant price war, which is quite interesting.
Well, I might disagree a little bit with you.
Tell me. Yes, love it.
Because, when we talk about subsidies, I mean, we must not forget actually the big German companies that have been selling into China and still selling into China very successfully, also locally producing, they are working together with big state-owned enterprises. You have the Shanghai Volkswagen, you have the ET Dazhong, and the other one is Shanghai Dazhong. They have the same treatment. So there is no special treatment for the local companies and different treatment for the foreign companies. Same for BMW. So you have BMW, you have Mercedes, they all had this joint ventures. I think the narrative of the overcapacity and how can I say we are being flooded now with Chinese cars because the Chinese produce so much, I don't quite agree. Because in the old days, there was no successful China car. And the Germans have been selling extremely well. And Japanese as well. And up till recently, I mean, Volkswagen almost enjoyed like a 50% market share. If you talk about luxury cars, let's say Mercedes Maybach, the top of the range, 60+% is sold to China. So you could also like say, oh, hey, Stuttgart, here, Mercedes-Benz, come over. I think we need to tax your Maybach because you have overcapacity selling to China. So we need to see the whole picture, especially companies that are producing in China for the global market. And I think even some of the German companies will now export, not just sell in China. This will affect everyone. So I think the current measures also by the EU to impose tariffs and also by the US, I hope it's not backfiring.
You hope it will backfire.
I hope it's not backfiring.
It's not going on. I thought, wow, that's a bold statement, Peter.
No.
But no, it's quite interesting. What I meant by the price wars and the subsidies is not that Chinese government is giving subsidies to local businesses and not supporting, any other investment. But what I mean is today, if I speak with the heads of EV companies, there is a saying in China, 你赚谁的钱? Whose money are you making? So who is feeding you? In reality, they are not making customers money. They're not making money on selling those 50 cars a month in the whole of country. It's not sustainable. They are making whose money? Government's money. So government is supporting, right? So they apply, they show, here's my manufacturer, here's my plan, here's what I'm doing. The government is giving you money, says, okay, keep doing it. Out of the 30 companies, they're not delusional. They know that only 3, 4, 5 will survive. But those they will survive, they will become the champions. And that not to say that some government initiatives in China as well do not address international players as well. But also these companies, right, that then try to say, okay, we received this money, bigger organizations feeding us for now. We need to deliver. We need to become the top 3, top 5. So they are aiming at the market share. And for that, they are in the price wars with other Chinese companies, dropping. And who is winning? Consumers.
Absolutely. So, now that you have these tariffs on those EV cars that go into Europe, actually the customer may also say, like, oh, why is EU punishing me? Because at the end of the day, it's the customer who pays,
who pays the bill. And these are good cars. When it comes to autonomous driving, we still need a bit of help, but rather than that, the hardware itself is beautiful. The only challenge, of course, I think that we are facing very heavily is the software integration, because in Europe you cannot really have a Xiaomi phone on a phone or whatnot, right? And integrating with Android, integrating with iOS would be a very, very important step at some point.
There's one part actually that I still want to add, because car manufacturing and car suppliers is one big mainstay of the German business. We may see that the end user as the B2B, like let's say the Volkswagen, the BMW, etc., they're currently facing a tough situation. But actually the suppliers, German suppliers like ZF, like Bosch, they're also supplying to BYD. They're also supplying to NIO, to all these companies.
So the suppliers of the car makers are having the time of their life.
Not all of them, but we also need to differentiate for that. So there's the brand that you eventually drive, but the glass roof or the windows, mechanics, etc. This can still be Bosch or ZF or Rasto, etc.
Let's talk about the IP rights. You've previously mentioned that this is something we can talk about for an hour. So when it comes to copycatting Western products and right now innovating the Chinese kind of China-created innovation, where are we in this IP battle?
I used to work for the German chamber and then later on, at the European chamber. And for many years, IP protection was on top of the complaint list. And it has really come down a lot. The reason for that, there have been a lot of implementations of law. But I think the main part is IP courts have been established. So there's currently 3 IP courts in China. One is in Beijing, the other one in Shanghai, and you might have guessed it, the third one in Guangzhou, in Knowledge City. The European chambers or the German chamber patting that, say, we've done a good job, it has improved so much. But actually, the main drive also comes from the local companies. So you have companies like Huawei, like Rewrite, like Xpeng, etc. They spend so much money on R&D now. I mean, but Huawei, I think it's like 30% of their revenue is spending on R&D. So
they have a strong incentive.
They wouldn't like to have their patents being stolen or abused. So the drive actually came from both the foreign companies, but also the local companies that are very innovative now. Now we have even service stations for patent registration, etc. So it's all in Huangpu for the whole of the Greater Bay Area.
Even when it comes to AI, today we see that China is by far leading the list of AI patents. Right. But in the broader business community, it very rarely translates into real business because patent is patent. Sometimes a significant improvement, sometimes a small improvement on an existing kind of matter or topic. Right. How are these patents really impacting businesses? Are we just collecting patents in order to protect our kind of position and we just, every single semi-screw needs one and then we are basically competing for the diploma on the wall, or are we actually making real life business?
Right. I think both is true. When we talk about China and, the narrative, or let's say about, there's so many patent registrations now and they're just trying to look good on paper, etc. But actually, when you look at the patents but also at publication. So for example, if you take Nature magazine, which is like an internationally recognized magazine, I mean, they are publishing these kind of inventions and discoveries. These kind of publications are going up, and these are the quality publications and quality patents. So of course, you will have some universities or whatever, they have this patent lab and they churn out one after another, for meeting their KPIs. So you have that, but then you have also real high quality innovation. I think China is always everything at the same time.
A friend of mine recently said, it was really fun, he said, in China, everything happens later, but faster. So with patents as well, everything happens later, but then faster. It's massive. Let's make another pivot in our chat today. Post-pandemic, the China's economy is different. A lot of people see it as stagnating, not recovering as fast. And one of the biggest challenges is probably also consumer sentiment, because people just don't feel like spending. And that is why so much government focus also goes on rekindling that consumption and that desire to actually spend the money. So, in your view, which sector right now of the Chinese economy are actually suffering the most or that are doing the best?
Again, with China, you have many stories at the same time. You have the downturn story, you have the level out story, and you have the upturn story. When we see currently what's in a doldrums basically is, the property sector still, and I think that it will still take some time. But I think for China, it's actually the first time that they really see a property downturn in their 40 years development since the reform and opening up. That's the first time. And I think it was overdue as well, because the prices were just totally disconnected to reality. Hong Kong had it for the first time in 98, Asia financial crisis, then during SARS, 2003. So, they're already this is something to be expected. Whereas here, took everyone a little bit by surprise. You know? So,
that also can happen.
This can happen, yeah. But it's a cleansing effect. Some of the bad players will be gone, some of the good players will retain, and the focus now is on what the official speech is, the 高质量发展, the high level, high quality development. So, and there you can see a lot of initiatives that are being taken, starting when you look at the third plenum recently, innovation. Anything that has to do with innovation, and innovation is inseparable with talent. High quality development and talent, they go hand in hand. So this requires more educational institutions, but also becoming more attractive to international talent as well. So now, post-COVID was a different story. We were hoping that it finally ends, and then it ended, and the border was open again. But now actually the border is really open. So we have a lot of countries now that...
Do they come?
They come. Received so many delegations from Germany, from France, from Spain, and they're all coming here. It's like, oh, wow. So I always seeing is believing. You need to come here. But there's only one part. Yesterday, there was a new Guangdong government policy, actually, that if you're an international talent in certain area, you also can just come here now, even if you don't have a working visa. And, you have this talent and you can...
You can try. You can try.
You can look here for a job. I mean, this is quite something special. Before you had to
get
the invitation, and it's like very, very complex. So there's a lot of avenues that are being tried and tested, usually first in one area, and then, being spread out. But speaking of talent, this is also quite attractive for the Greater Bay Area because, as you may know, we have the rebate for our income tax. So if you're an international talent and we have basically been certified as such, then you only pay 15% of your income tax. But actually, it's a rebate. So you pay your normal tax first, and then after a few years...
you will get your money back.
It takes quite a while, but it's a nice saving scheme once you get it. So this is actually only happening in the Greater Bay Area. And it's a little bit of, because we used to have this situation where a lot of talent, they would be registered in Hong Kong and then work in Guangzhou or Shenzhen because of the lower tax in Hong Kong,
which is understandable,
15%. And now it's like you don't need to do that. So actually you can enjoy also the lower cost here because cost in Hong Kong is quite forbidding.
In so many ways. And I think it's extremely, extremely important that we have finally started doing that, because just half a year ago, how many times, at least in my immediate surrounding, I've heard of people that were living in China for 6, 7, 10 years, and you still need to renew your visa yearly, which is in many countries quite a ridiculous setup, which also means that, let's imagine you run a business or you are employed with a large company. Every year you feel that unnecessary level of anxiety whether or not you will be prolonged and allowed. And there were also some horror stories, so to say, where people said, oh, I was a professor at XYZ university, and then 1 year, lived here for 10 years, and 1 year my visa was just not renewed, so I'm sent back, I do not know what happened, etc. So we want to become that Greater Bay Area as the location and destination for people to come, stay, develop, grow, know that they have feet in the ground and some right to stay here if they earned it. So important.
Absolutely.
So welcome international community to come, fly in without visas, great initiative. But what is really needed is what you said. Try it in Guangzhou first, lower taxes, make it attractive, and also give them the confidence that if you work for it, you can stay. Like for me, I naturalized, which is very rare, and it's a very complicated process. Maybe at some point it will become much easier. I've actually heard that it's becoming easier, but it's not for everyone, for sure, right?
Exactly.
It's beautiful to hear that this is already happening. So any specific industries that you would recommend international community, foreign community to look at? Previously it was sourcing, right? Guangzhou equals sourcing. Everybody comes here for Canton Fair. Right now, some tech development, etc. What would you recommend international businesses to look at right now when it comes to the city?
Of course, Guangzhou is a 2,100 years old trading hub. Actually, when we go a little bit back in the history, 2,100 years old. So the oldest of the 4 first-tier cities, so Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen. Guangzhou is the oldest. But then it was the only port in China that was allowed to deal with the Laowai, the Guailou. Guangzhou has this trading background, but nevertheless, Guangzhou is actually also one of the main medical centers in China, but actually also in Southeast Asia. So we have World League cancer therapy here. in Guangzhou. When we talk about pharmaceutical industry, of course, currently there's still most of them for the foreign companies, they're in the Yangtze River Delta, but actually their market is here, because we have the really very large cluster of very high-ranking, very high-quality hospitals. So there is a trend of investment in the life science industry. That's one part. Then, of course, the other part is currently there's a lot of investment also into AI. There's a lot of investment also into the chip manufacturing. What many people also don't know is actually Guangzhou is the largest automobile center in China. Yeah. So, we have the GAC Guangqi, their corporations with Honda, Toyota, and then, we have our local brands, the XPeng, but also, like new energy vehicles, the ION, you might have seen. So, there's quite a few industries. When we talk about Guangzhou Huangpu in particular, we can summarize it as IABNEM. So this is basically ICT, AI, biomedicine, new energy, and new materials. New energy in 2021, there's actually also quite interesting thing because currently we talk a lot about the new energy vehicle, the battery cars. But actually, at the same time, there's another new development, it's hydrogen.
Yeah.
So we have, we already have hydrogen street sweepers, etc. Like the large buses, for example, also. But in 2021, actually, Hyundai, the Korean Hyundai, set up a factory to produce hydrogen-driven passenger cars. So this will be another
next level, and it's basically water, right? The byproduct is just
it's water. Exactly, because the green energy is still a big focus, and they also want to, how can I say, not just have the battery cars, but also a different option.
So when it comes to the recovery, you've just now mentioned a few times the third plenum, the focus on innovation, the focus on obviously nurturing talent, and we spoke a lot about the focus of Guangzhou, such as healthcare, AI, chips, new materials, new energy, etc. In your view, when it comes to China's economic recovery right now, from today, mid-2024, how long will it take? Are we going back to the normal, or are we moving ahead to this new normal? What will it look like?
Well, I think it will be a new normal. The plan now forward is to achieve around 5% of annual growth. So this may...
Is it realistic?
This may sound very little, but actually it's still...
On a big bottom line? Yes. On a big baseline?
When you compare it to a world scale, if China grows at 5%, that's around adding one Switzerland every year. So this is still quite substantial, right? Of course, you face the difficulties, but I think once the property sector is out of the way, or there's a certain recovery and consumer confidence has been regained, I think this is one of the keys, the consumer confidence, because we can see, the whole world is in turmoil, so you can see in the US, consumer confidence is not so high, in Europe also not so high. So China will rely on the BRICS or the global south, but the global south is is getting stronger, but the purchasing power is not there yet. So if you can tap the domestic market, then that will be wonderful. And the domestic market, it's not like that they don't have the money, it's they don't spend. And this also depends on certain, how can I say, adjustments that China will eventually make, like let's say for example the health insurance, so that people feel like, if I don't have this security system, just like we have in Germany, you pay every month part of your income into that system, and then you can enjoy the hospital stay and you can enjoy your pension, etc. Right now people saving or put it all into the property. So if that becomes more developed, then people will become more confident to spend more. But you can see when we look at the July figures, actually the consumer spending index has already notched up a little bit. It changes every month, but currently it looks more positive.
Looks more positive. So in a couple of years, we're going to be out of the woods.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. That level of confidence. Love it. What is one question that I should have asked you today, but I haven't yet?
That's a good question. Why come to Guangzhou?
Why come to Guangzhou? Let's go.
I need to still do a little bit of a sales pitch.
It's not a sponsored post, guys. It is not.
Sponsored by. When I came to Guangzhou in 2013, 2013 Guangzhou is a very different Guangzhou from now. But I felt after a few months, I should have come earlier. It's a great place. When you talk about the 4 first-tier cities that I just mentioned, Guangzhou is the most low-key one.
And the cheapest one to live.
And you have it all here. You have a nice business environment. You have people that like to work hard, but also like to work smart and play hard. You have fantastic food here. You have the great outdoors here. I like hiking, cycling, bird watching.
Yes.
I'm out in the nature, every week. And you can be very quickly in Hong Kong, you can be very quickly in Macau. But you can also be very quickly in Bangkok or in Singapore. If you think that from, the Yangtze River Delta, it's a much longer way, or, not to mention Beijing. So if you want to integrate your business in the RCEP context, I think Guangzhou is a fantastic location. Yeah. Okay, that's all for my sales pitch.
Peter, thank you so very much. So many insights about the industries, the way to work together, and of course, the reasons to come to Guangzhou. How to connect with you best? What is the best way to reach you for those interested?
Well, LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Hit him up and
send me a message. I never turn you down.
Well, DMs are open. DMs are open. And do check out Guangzhou next time you're in China. It was fantastic this time to reconnect with the city, the culture, the businesses, to see the community. It's really, really fun. And of course, stay tuned for Ashley's Digital China episodes to come soon.